Welcome to Creating a Life in Music. My name is Mike Salo. I'm a guitarist and music educator from Minneapolis, Minnesota in the US, and I want to know how other musicians make their living, how they got there, how they sustain it, and most importantly, the insights and tips they may have for the rest of us. I interview musicians from all over the world, from various parts of the music industry to break down the question, how do I do music full time? So join me as we discover the many different ways to create a life in music. If you're a guitar player who's ever wanted to attend music college but couldn't because it's too expensive or too far away, or maybe you're just beyond that point in your life and you're just too busy with your own family and your own career to commit to something like that, I would highly recommend going and checking out fretboardbiology.com. At only $29 a month, Fretboard Biology takes out all the guesswork, putting the right things in the right order. It's highly structured, highly organized, college-level guitar program designed by one of the top guitar educators on the planet, Joe Elliott. Joe was head of the guitar department at McNally Smith for a number of years, where he designed the entire guitar curriculum, as well as being head over at Musicians Institute in Hollywood for many, many years. He knows what you need to know. And you can get 50% off your first month when you go to fretboardbiology.com/register-salo, my last name, that's S-A-L-O-W. So fretboardbiology.com/register-salo.
Oh, yeah. That was such a good way of understanding that.
Yeah, I appreciate you just saying that.
There's so many students of mine, when they get every guitarist in one point of their life gets obsessed with modes. Yeah. And a lot of them start thinking, okay, well, what's my tonal center? What's the chord that I'm over? It's so cool though to think, well, what is the color I'm looking for? What's the sound I'm looking for? And approach modes like that. So I thought that video was so revelatory for so many people. I think that was awesome.
Yeah, a lot of people get super confused. It's like an overcomplicated subject.
It really is,
because I've made little snippet modal videos over the past couple of years, and there are certain people, like if you start to even mention like relative modes, they're like, that is not helpful. Don't teach it like that. And it's like, I mean, it's part of the story.
Part of the process.
It's part of the process. I was like, the problem is people stop there.
Yeah.
Is they go, oh, that's because for me, that's actually what fixed my understanding of the modes. I had learned it the opposite. I had learned it as
the parallel way.
Yeah. I had learned it as separate scales. And I was like, how am I going to remember all of these? I don't know how to. And then someone was like, laid out the relative part. And I was like, oh, okay. And then it was, So if you don't have the whole story,
absolutely,
it can be just as bad as having the right part, I guess.
Yeah, it's so true. When I went to school for music, I got my degree in classical guitar. And when they teach it to you, and when you're in music theory in college, they teach it to you starting with that parallel way, because you have the parallel way and the derivative way, or the relative way, some people call it. And so I make sure just with my students, it helped me so much when I, step back and just thought, all of these are just a major scale. Like that's literally all it is. You just have to change where you're starting. But when I teach modes to my students, I start by explaining the two ways, or those two approaches to the modes. You have the parallel way, which is probably the more complicated way, where you have C Ionian, C Dorian, C Phrygian, and then you have the derivative way, or that relative way. And the way that I teach it is I actually say, this is going to be our modes diatonically, or approaching them diatonically. And then I teach it that way first, and then I basically teach both approaches in the same lesson, but first explain it derivatively, and then start, plugging everything in. But I find teaching it that way, explaining both ways, but teaching it that relative way, the derivative way, or the diatonic way, is just so much easier to find it. It's just connecting that. Yeah. But it's so important too. You can't stop there. If you stop there, that's when things get. Yeah.
Yeah, because they'll be like the common thing that I get with students will come in and essentially they will say something like, "Oh yeah, so when I'm playing Dorian, I just like if I'm playing A Dorian, I just think G major," and I'm like, "That works." I was like, "But we should work to really see it."
Yeah.
I was like, "We should work to see it as its own kind of tonality and its own thing, because it has its own sound and it's got its own function and it reacts." One thing I always point out is like, I'm like, when we're going to this part, I'll be like, do you hear the major scale different than the minor scale? And they'll be like, oh yeah. I'm like, when you play in a major key, do you think minor? And they're like, no, not really. Well, what about the opposite? Like, no. And I was like, those are modes. I was like, those two scales are modes, and they have a similar thing. I was like, they're more stable than the other modes, and that becomes very difficult, I think, for people once you get that word in there. I'm like, they're more stable, and they're like, what does that mean? Yeah, I was like, it means too much chord progression movement, and you might not know that you all of a sudden you're going to feel like you're in the relative major. Right. You can only do so much with Lydian to make it sound Lydian. Sure. And then all of a sudden it sounds like you've gone to the relative major or something. Yeah. But yeah, I love the modal conversation. It's funny awesome. Too, that bright to dark thing. That was something that, I mean, there's, going to music school, there are just certain things I feel like certain instructors would just teach and they would just stick. So that wasn't anything that I ever did. Someone just showed it to me when I was in college. It's like a lot of my exercises, people are like, wow, this is great. I'm like, I'm from college. Some of
the best exercises that I've learned, that I've had on the guitar that I tell students are like, when I was going to school for music, I have my nerdy guitar player friends, but then I also have, horn players, tons of brass players, drummers, and I steal a bunch of their exercises and then just apply them to the guitar. I know. One student, an exercise, like, this is the best thing I've ever learned on the guitar. I'm like, this is a trumpet exercise.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like, in applying them against the guitar in a certain way, like, there's one thing that I will teach, I get a lot of students who will be like, I'm trying to play this lick in all the keys. And I'm like, that's cool. I was like, great. I was like, but a lot easier on guitar than it is on trumpet. Definitely. I was like, how about different positions? Yeah. Like, try to play that in a different position in a different box, because it's going to feel different. I was like, our challenge isn't moving to new keys necessarily as guitar players. It's like moving to new positions. All of a sudden they're like, it's too high, bring it up an octave. And people are like, and they just go up 12 frets. They just go up 12 frets. I mean, I remember that point in college when a teacher would say that. He'd be like, play it up an octave. And you'd be like, and just go up 12 frets. And they'd be like, no. He's like, bring it up an octave in position. And you're like, oh, crap. Position. Yeah. That's great. Which is really funny. So, born and raised in Orlando? Have you been there?
So I was born in Miami. Okay. My family actually moved a little bit north of Miami in South Florida after Hurricane Andrew took out like our entire neighborhood. It was terrible. Wow. Yeah, terrible hurricane. But that's part of being a Floridian. They're just storms to us. But then settled in Orlando when I was around 7 or 8 years old. Went to school here, graduated high school from here. After high school, spent a few years in Nashville. I was doing some work for publishing companies, making some demos, did some tours based out of there, a lot of session work, played all those fun places in downtown Nashville. Was great. Absolutely loved it. Spent about 3 years or so there, right after high school. And then, realized, when I'm in my 40s, when I'm a mom, when I have a family, do I want to be touring and doing like all this stuff and not having like some normalcy to my life? And then decided to come back home to finish just get a degree in the guitar. I started my guitar degree at 22. I had not learned how to read music on the guitar. I had done everything by ear. And so the entire time I was making a living, playing guitar in Nashville for a few years, did everything by ear. But it taught me, you never know who's in the audience if you're in a small club in Nashville. So you gotta be an A-list player in your own mind, no matter what, if there's 10 people in that club, So it taught me so much about stage presence. It taught me so much about speaking the language of music, even though I could not read the actual language of music. And that's one of my main things when I teach. I talk about how music is a conversation, music is communication, it is a language, and there's a lot of that can be done in an unwritten way. But then I finished. I got my classical guitar degree, and that's a lot when you're going to school for music. When you get a performance degree, I was at University of Central Florida, really, really great guitar program there. I was doing classical track, but I also was taking the jazz master classes and jazz lessons, all the jazz theory courses. And then I was such a nerd that all my elective classes were mathematics. So I guess that's maybe a normal guitar player's brain. But Absolutely loved it. Really fell in love with the instrument. When you're going to school for a performance degree, and you're very familiar with just, what it takes to really study an instrument and master it, you're really going to school for like two separate things. You're going to school to become a guitar player and to really master the performance aspect of it and master the instrument. It's also like getting a degree in theory. I mean, especially for someone like me that was coming from primarily learning by ear and just, experiencing the language of music on a stage, with just feeling it and experiencing like that. It was a total shift, but it was one of the best things I ever did for my life. It really prepared me for the doors that have been opening, really from COVID on. And that really shifted things into me falling in love with just the nature of the guitar and teaching the instrument. I mean, because when you lock yourself in a practice room for, anywhere from 8 to 10 hours a day on top of all of your theory classes and everything, and on top of teaching like 20 students and having gigs and skipping exams because you have to do European tours, like that was my life. And I would still make sure I would at least get 8 hours a day in a practice room. And when it's just you, nylon string guitar, and it's a divine experience. Like you learn how to make different color and effects out of just your fingers and your nails and the different areas that you can place those on the strings. And it was a wonderful experience. I thought I loved the guitar. And then when I really stripped everything, I'm an effects girl. If you've seen my stuff, like I love working with plugins. I love working with my quad cortex. I love working with standalone pedals. I absolutely love it. But you really learn tone and color when you strip all of that away and it's just your fingers and the strings. It was a beautiful experience, and I'm so grateful that I did that. It has set me up for my teaching career in ways I could never imagine. And there's doors that have been opened for me that I would not have been able to walk through if I did not have the education of the instrument itself from that.
If you're a guitar player or bass player, you should really have a copy of Guitar Pro tablature software. I've been using Guitar Pro for like 15 years, and I really can't live without it. At this point, it's sort of an industry standard within the guitar education realm, and it's really easy to use. You can make all your licks and write out all your songs, and you can actually use it in conjunction with ultimateguitar.com, where you can download Guitar Pro files and learn all your favorite songs. So I couldn't recommend this software enough. And if you use the code MikeGP at checkout, you can get 10% off your copy of Guitar Pro 8. That's Mike, MikeGP, at checkout, guitar-pro.com. Yeah, that's great that you say that, because I think, I often get a lot of, I get mixed reviews from people who have gone to school for music. Like some people are like, don't do it. Other people are like,
and I will chime in on this too, because it's not for everybody.
Yep. Yeah, it's interesting because I think with there are several common threads. I mean, obviously the biggest common thread for people in their maybe their disdain for their experience is likely the money sometimes that it costs to go to school for music, and maybe the degree itself and what that degree can get in terms of a requirement for a position. But I think what people miss in that conversation is the actual point of any degree beyond the degree itself, and that is mastery of the specific thing that you're going to be educated on. And if you've achieved what you feel as mastery in your own right, I think that's success. And I think that's really, really, really irreplaceable, because it's really easy to say, well, I could have not gone to school for music and I could have just got a good teacher and learned it on my own and blah, 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 blah. But school in that regard, you are forced fed, whether you like it or not, like all the stuff you need to know. And that thing over your head the entire time is good grades. So whereas if you just if you just took a really good teacher for 4 years, you'd have to be the most self-motivated person out there. Because I've always said this, those 3 years I spent at music school, it was like my from the point I started playing guitar, and then here's when I started music school, and that's my progress. And then after music school, I was up here. It was like a huge, just like, it was almost like a nice little warp zone for 3 years or whatever to get you to a higher level, which I think is, I was a huge fan. I wouldn't play the way I would play with today without the education. I just wouldn't.
Same.
Yeah. And I had similar things. I started when I was 21 at music school, and I couldn't read. I couldn't read anything. I mean, I could kind of understand music. I was in choir and stuff, so I understood like half notes and whole notes and stuff like that. But like, I couldn't read guitar music. And so that actually brings me to a question. So when you were in Nashville, were you presented with charts when you first went? Yeah.
So when we're talking charts, we're talking. I've got numbers and lines.
Yep.
National number systems. That's not like theory, but you do have to understand when they're yelling at you in a session really fast. Hey, we're going to do 11, 45, 26, and they're calling them two numbers at a time. So like you have to make sure you know that much of it. But I mean, those rhythm charts compared to like rhythm charts I would see like in like a jazz theory course in college or like a jazz rhythm chart, those are entirely different.
Yeah.
It still was, I could get by with it. And I do have a lot of students, ask me, do I need to learn theory? Like, if I'm already playing in a band, if like I'm playing shows, I'm doing what I want to do with the instrument, do I need to learn theory? And again, if I go back, I always say, if you can really approach music as communication, if you approach music as a language, let's just take, the English language. If somebody was going to be coming to the United States and they had not spoken English, they could take English courses before they get there and learn the language. Great. They could also not learn a lick of English and come to this country and be surrounded by people. And they're eventually going to be submerged in the culture and submerged in the language where they're going to pick up on some things. It might take longer, but they're still going to learn it. And so kind of what I think about with this to relate it with music, if you take someone, I don't know if you've ever read Keith Richards' life, the Keith Richards book, but there's some things where he talks about how when they would teach music in schools, he didn't really enjoy it because he would actually say the music staff looks like the notes are in a prison, like they're in a cage. And he was like very turned off by it, which that's so Keith Richards. And I absolutely love that about him. So I do have some students say, well, like Dave Grohl, he didn't go to school for theory. And you had Keith Richards that said he didn't want to read music, but at the same time, if you take a Keith Richards or a Dave Grohl, they are submerged in this culture of music. They're submerged by that experience. So they're going to be learning it to some extent. Because it's their entire life and their entire being. So like if I have a student that, I have a few students that are doing some great things. And if I have a student that's, going to be constantly playing shows every weekend or on a tour and they don't know any theory, they're going to learn it. It's almost like when culture, some things are passed down in oral tradition. You know what I mean? It's still going to happen that way. Now, for me personally, I wanted to take it to the next level because I was there where I was accomplishing a lot without the theory background. I was accomplishing a lot without reading music. And what really changed everything for me, the year before I decided to actually go back to my hometown of Orlando and to actually get a degree in music, a degree in guitar. Because one huge factor there, I decided to go for like a classical guitar track rather than like a jazz or like a commercial track. And what really changed everything for me was I was in Barcelona, Spain. I had one summer before college where I'd had like 3 separate trips to Italy for different music things and like within like 2 months. It was a crazy, crazy year. But my family, we took like some, my family doesn't do, if we go on a vacation, we just drive 45 minutes to the beach and that's our vacation. So we actually took a great vacation and we went to Barcelona, Spain. And in Barcelona, I'm a huge Picasso fan and that's Picasso's town. There's so much Picasso there. And I went to a Picasso museum, and in the Picasso museum, they have everything of his chronologically. So they have like drawings that he did when he was like 16 or 17 years old, which like will give you chills like you wouldn't believe. And then they go through his life, and he would draw like human hands, like human, very, very lifelike things. And then throughout the museum, when you get towards like the the Picasso looking Picassos, where he really invented Cubism as a visual art form. Because you had Gertrude Stein, who had Cubism for literary work, but he was the one to really create Cubism for the visual arts. And, you know, I always knew, I have seen Picassos in my life, and ever since I was a kid, even when I would see a picture, I know we're guitar players, so I'm talking about Picasso, but I do have a point here. But ever since I was a kid and I would see a picture of a Picasso, there was something in me, like I cry every single time I see a Picasso. And I never really knew why. I really knew nothing about Picasso when I was a child, but going through this, and you think, well, Picasso's the guy that invented Cubism. He invented Cubism after he studied all of these types of arts that came before him, all of these different art forms, all of these different mediums, all of these different styles that came before him. And then he became an artist and filled a void. He filled a void and he created something that had not been done yet. And it was so compelling for me, thinking, you know, when you're in your early 20s and you can play the guitar and you've done a few tours and you've played, you know, in front of thousands of people, there is a little tiny bit of, you know, your mind that tells you, you're doing great, kid. Like you're doing awesome. You're an artist. Like you're rocking it. You're killing it. You know, you don't need go to school. You don't need theory. You just keep doing what you're doing. You're great. But watching that, looking through all of the things that Picasso has done, I realized I hadn't gone back in time and really, really studied and really consumed myself with what came before me. And when I'm talking about that, like I had never learned Renaissance music. I had never learned anything prior to, you know, a century before me.
Yeah.
So it was so compelling for me. And it was still, I was kind of feeling, you know, a few months prior to that, you know, do I want to be touring the rest of my life? Do I want to be, you know, not having normalcy or any type of balance, which balance is still a hard thing. If you can figure that out, let me know. But that really compelled me to not only study music, study the language of music, get my degree. It really compelled me to study the classical guitar. And honestly, probably the first 2 years of music school, first 2 years of studying classical guitar, it was probably the hardest time of my life because I felt like I was going backwards, because you are literally going backwards and you have to, it is a beautiful unlearning, and you don't see the beauty in it until after you've done it. But it was the most strenuous, frustrating process because I had to slow down. I remember probably the first piece that I played for my professor in college. It was an andante tempo marking. Andante means walking pace. And I was flying through that. My professor says, stand up and walk to the door. I literally put my guitar down and I stand up and I walk to the door. And he says, do you see how fast you walk to that door? He says, you walk too fast. That's why you're interpreting andante, which means walking pace too fast. So it was, again, this beautiful unlearning of slowing everything down. And I think it's such an important thing to do. And, you know, I wish I learned that, you know, 10 years prior to when I actually did learn that. And I'm still learning that. And it's an ongoing process, but going backwards and really learning about the things that, not only the things that I've been influenced by or the people that I've been influenced by, but who were they influenced by? You know, Jack White has that thing where there's a White Stripes interview where he says, you know, find out, you know, take the guitar players you love, the artists you love, and find out who they were listening to. And then you'll really find out what you love. So I do think going backwards in time to study that classical style, learning Renaissance music, learning romantic music, you know, probably the best thing that I ever did as a guitar player was learn like a 25-minute Bach lute suite transcribed to the guitar, and looking through lute music, looking through violin music to see like how the slurs are actually done. It was me for about a year and a half trying to memorize that piece. And I was the Nashville player where I had a track sent to me. I'm driving to the gig in the car, listening to it, and I get on stage and I rip the lick. That's what you do. That's what you do. So for me to have to analyze music and spend about a year and a half to truly understand that Bach lute suite, it worked patient. And my weakness, the people that know me, I can be a very impatient person. I really can. And teaching has helped me with that, become more patient. But I think that was the best thing that I ever did for my career, was to go back in time and study the things that have come before me. It's helped me become a better artist.
One of the best things you can do as a musician is to protect your own hearing. I've been using these Eargasm high-fidelity earplugs for months now, and I really love them. They're nice and discreet, high quality, and they don't make any of the sound muffled. They let in the right frequencies that I need on gigs or at shows. You can get 10% off your order if you use code MSALO10 at checkout. That's my first initial M, my last name Salo, S-A-L-O-W, 10 at checkout to get 10% off your order at eargasm.com.
Yeah, for sure. Random question about that. I remember specifically doing some classical stuff. The very first time my teacher was like, you're going to learn this piece. Here's the sheet music. And he played it for me. I'd be like, yeah, it sounds fine. I can do that. And then going home and being like, wow, what the like,
yeah. You're like, what is this? This is not a guitar. This is a different instrument.
And then because you're so full of yourself when you're in your early 20s, especially when I first started music school, I was like, I'm gonna crush it here. And then there was a couple. I think that first classical piece, which I can like looking back, I'm like, wow, I can't believe I thought this was hard. But like at the time, I remember being like, yeah, I can play that. Yeah, just give me the sheet music. And I went home and it was like, not only was it difficult to get my fingers playing like kind of counterpoint and like melody and moving bass lines at the same time, which sounded easy when he did it. And it wasn't even that complex of a song. Yeah. And then trying to read on top of that, it was like trying to get my hands to do something new and also trying to get my brain to do, it's like trying to do two things at once that I'm not, it's never crazy. Done. And then after, it just, the only fix for that is time and effort.
Yeah, it really is.
And, you bring about the school stuff. And I think the one takeaway I had, because I ended up teaching at the same college that I graduated from for like 5 years. And it was always tell my students, like, you get out of this what you put in. I was like, you can go pass all your classes. That's great. I was like, passing the classes means nothing. I was like, kids, I've seen students come through here who are not going to do anything with, who won't, because they just didn't put in, but they passed the classes. I was like, and
they don't know how to make a living from it.
No,
that's exactly what I had to learn on my own.
Because passing those classes, like if you're just passing guitar classes, I mean, you really have to try to excel and like I said, get out of it. You get out what you put in. So you got to be really after it and really conscientious of all aspects of your playing, what you're going to do afterward. Cause there are a lot of students I remember like, oh, this was a waste, like, blah, blah, blah. They would like kind of be down on, and it was like, that's not the school's fault. Like you didn't put in any effort.
Absolutely.
You come in really closed-minded thinking that like really all this stuff is like stupid. I don't need to know how to play jazz, or I don't know how to do this. And it's like, it's less on the school and more on the student.
Definitely.
Well, I was going to ask you, is this touring experience? So you went up to Nashville. So was that straight out of high school? Was this church stuff, or was this something else?
It was just hired gun stuff. Honestly, I played with some like blues bands, country stuff. I was a hired gun for a lot of CMA Fest stuff. I did the European tours that I've done was a band actually based out of Orlando that was affiliated with the USO that would play at military bases in Italy, Germany. So had great experiences with that. Probably one of the coolest shows I ever played was playing in the American Embassy in Rome to Marines and Swiss Guards. And the day after, the Swiss Guards gave us a private tour of the Vatican, which was just incredible. It was so cool. But yeah, I had great experiences with that. I've actually been able to travel a lot through worship stuff. I was affiliated with a lot of churches in Orlando and did some like worship conventions that were in South Africa. I've done one in Spain. All over the US. So been very blessed to be able to travel with it's crazy. You do these things and you think when I was 11 years old, taking my first guitar lesson, you don't think it's going to lead to all these doors opening up. I've been able to see so much stuff from learning music. It's crazy. I don't deserve any of it. It's like, that's crazy. That's crazy to me. It's just crazy to me. I wake up every day and I'm like, I can't believe I get to do this. I live every day with extreme gratitude. I can't believe I'm able to do this. It's amazing. I mean, I've worked my butt off, but but it's really a beautiful thing.
So you are currently teaching and gigging? Is that kind of the main thing? So are these So I saw you have the till thing, which I did a couple till things as well.
Yeah.
So are you just mostly teaching online, or are you teaching in town in Orlando too?
Yeah. So I teach online, and actually the till thing, one of the reasons why I thought, well, this is definitely a legit thing when the till people came to me, because I saw you on the website. If he's teaching a course, this is like a legit thing. I got to hop on this. This is awesome. But pre-COVID, it was kind of half and half, my income from teaching and performing. And just kind of to piggyback off what you said back when you're talking about the music school stuff, I've graduated with a ton of people, fabulous musicians that are like, they're not making money making music right now. And it was so important for me. Like I even remember literally after my first guitar lesson when I was 11 years old, I learned like some Hillary Duff song on the guitar. I was like an 11-year-old with braces. It was crazy. But I remember after that lesson, I came to my mom and my dad and I said, I'm doing this for a career. After my first lesson, I said, this is my career. And they're like, okay, honey, that's great. Like, that's great. But so I knew when I was in music school, like nobody owes me anything. You know what I mean? Like nobody's going to go out and do anything for me. So if I actually became the top string player in the university within 2 years, which is great. I was able to do a lot of competitions and everything. And that means nothing, honestly. If you don't know if you don't have the awareness that when you're a musician, you're your own business, nothing's going to happen. So I really had to figure that out. So before I had graduated, I graduated in winter of 2018. So like right before 2019, right before I was graduating, I was teaching about 25 students in person. I would drive to people, just local, drive and teach. And then the other half of my income was coming from outside gigs, a lot of corporate events, a little bit of touring stuff, and then playing at churches, mega churches on the weekends. And so I had a good thing going right there. So I knew, I don't have my degree yet, and the degree takes a ton of time. If you think even on top of doing all that, I had 8 to 10 hours a day from just practicing for, recitals and everything. It's insane what you do for that. But I always had an entrepreneurial mindset. When I was 15 and I didn't have my driver's license, obviously, I would take students in my parents' neighborhood and I could walk to houses. And that's how I just knew, well, let me start teaching. I had a great guitar teacher. I'll have to send this to him. His name's Kevin Hardy. He's an insane guitarist based out of Orlando, Florida. And I was like 13 or 14 after like 2 or 3 years of learning from him. And he said, if you can find one person that knows less than you do on the guitar, that's a student. And so he really instilled, go out and just try to find students, and he said that's how you're going to become a better guitarist, is starting to teach people. So pre-COVID, when I had graduated, I was doing pretty good. I had about 25 students. That was great. I was making great money, playing at churches on the weekend, gigging in Orlando, I did a lot of session work. I still do. And then COVID happens. And then, I honestly, I'm sure most people at that time had existential crisis. And I was thinking, do I need to do something different with my life? And honestly, I really contemplated like either going to school for something new, which I kind of did not want to do. Because I'm thinking, like, if half of my income is coming from face-to-face stuff, or no, at the time I was teaching in person. So I'm like, all of it's coming from face-to-face. So I really thought, do I need to do something different with my life? And I know this sounds so lame, but ever since I was a kid, my only dream was to be a math teacher. I love math. And I was like, should I just, go to school for mathematics or like get an engineering degree? I always thought that would be cool. I honestly contemplated that. And it's just the weirdest thing. The church that I was attending at the time, they said, hey, you're the guitar player at the church. Do you mind making like a beginner kids guitar video and just like put it on YouTube so like the kids of the church can learn guitar during COVID? I was like, yeah, absolutely. Why not? I'll give back. These kids can learn guitar. Yeah. I make like the crappiest looking video. It ends up getting like 1 point something million views on YouTube. And I'm like, oh my gosh, maybe I'm actually really good at teaching online. And so I just started putting up videos. And it was COVID time. Yeah, it's, if you look up like kids guitar with Caitlin, it's the lamest video. The lighting is horrible. There's like awful shadows in the background. It was shot at my parents' house when I was living with my parents during COVID. It's absolutely terrible. But I guess that shows you that quality of what the content is rather than the actual quality of the production of the content.
I mean, that's so true. And if the guitar for, I clicked on the wrong one.
It's like Guitar for Kids. I don't even know the title of it yet. I don't even watch it anymore because it's just embarrassing. It looks terrible, but it had over like 1 million hits really quickly. Man, and when you monetize on YouTube, that's a nice little, direct deposit coming in every month. It's awesome.
Yeah. And Guitar for Kids, especially there was okay, someone else is copying Guitar for Kids. I see another guy. So it's not to interrupt with that, but there's an interesting thing that always occurs when there is like kind of crises, and that is this sounds really bad, and I hate to even say this, but there's a doors open for certain opportunities for certain industries, and one door that opened doors that opened for this case was online instruction.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
Like being early to that and doing that, and then just being like, like there's so many people on there like, this is what we've been looking for. I need this while we're at home.
Yeah. If there's obstacles, if you can somehow find an opportunity out of an obstacle, like that's it. That's how you make things happen.
You can meet all those things. So like you say you didn't like the production, but the content is there. So if good content meets a huge window for like need in the community, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is what I was looking for, and now everyone just so perfect time exist.
Absolutely. So I just kind of pressed into that, and it was during it was like, I think it was the week of the shutdown. I put a video on my my Facebook page, like not even my Instagram, my Facebook page, just for like friends and family stuff. And I said, if you sign up for like, if you book at least 2 lessons, so multiple lessons, you get the second lesson of the week half off. So then because I was just trying to like fill up my schedule with students and anything I can. If I teach, like even just if I teach free lessons, I'm teaching. I just thought, even if I'm not getting paid what I should be getting paid for every lesson, I'm filling up my roster of students. And that to me was the most important thing. And I think it's not stressed enough, and it should be. It is so important to start making an email list. An email list is so much more important than just follower count, because those are the people that are invested in you. And I was getting an email list. I was getting all these emails. If I can at least get a roster of students that are invested enough to learn guitar for me during the time we all think the world's ending, those are the students that I know I'm going to keep. And I still have some of those students. And again, I was teaching guitars. I started teaching guitar when I was about 15 years old. So I did have a lot of teaching experience, but the new online thing was a total different animal. But I just started, you couldn't book things through the website as soon as I started. So I had to like be emailing students back and forth, finding their time slots. It was a pain in the butt before, like Calendly and Acuity before that. Before I started using that, it was such a pain. People paying me through like Venmo and PayPal. It was a lot to focus on. But it blew up. It absolutely blew up. And, honestly, I thought when things started kind of dwindling down, things were opening back up again, I'm like, okay, great. I can go back to my life of gigging and performing and doing that, 50% of my time. And honestly, like, I don't think I do have more opportunities coming, but the teaching has been more rewarding than anything I've ever done in my life. I went from having probably the first month of COVID, I think I got up to like 50 students, like immediately. I think I saved probably 15 of the 20 or 25 that I was teaching in person. Some of them were like, didn't want to do it online, but I was like, it's okay. I have all these other ones that I've just gotten from YouTube, gotten from Facebook and Instagram. And I'm now now everything's scaled a little bit more. And we can talk about how I actually scaled being able to handle so many students. So I teach all my students for one-on-one lessons. Obviously they're one-on-one through Zoom. I have over 200 of a student list that are regularly taking lessons with me through Zoom, just one-on-one lessons. And that took a long time to get to that point. But I now have, like, it's really cool to have that number and when you get to the point where kind of your social media is rolling for you, and when you get to the point where social media is fighting for you, and you don't have to fight all the battles on your own, you don't have to be like hunting for students. It's all I need to worry about now is just, here are my scheduling blocks week to week, and my students kind of, sometimes they have to fight for them, but it's at a wonderful place now where in order for me to acquire more students, I just have to put up a reel on Instagram or just kind of be feeding the Instagram monster, or like, I think of it as a Tamagotchi. I'm a 90s kid. So those little Tamagotchis that you would feed. Yeah. So I have to feed that little Instagram pet every now and then to just, keep things alive, keep things ticking. And then everything just kind of does it itself. My students, they just click a link, they book a lesson, the slot they want. The only time I have to talk with them is when I'm on Zoom with them. It's great. But I've had such a revelation of how important teaching is and how important teaching the guitar, not necessarily, I don't want to say teaching the guitar the correct way, but teaching the guitar in an effective way where this is going to be they're going to be a lifer in this and they're actually learning the language. It has become so rewarding to me because my students are doing great things. But I knew when I saw how much life change was happening by teaching people the guitar in a really easy way, a really effective way, I knew I truly believe this is my calling. I love performing, and I'm actually working with some really incredible projects here in the Orlando area right now. Hopefully that will take off soon. And I'll probably have to balance that hate the word balance, but I have to balance my schedule a little bit more. But the teaching right now for me, it's not 100% of my time, but it's 100% of me. And I think probably the best marketing for anything, especially if there's I'm sure there's guitar teachers that listen to this podcast. Yeah. If you want your client list, your student list to start exploding, you can do social media ads, you can do social media marketing, all of that. The greatest form of marketing, and a form of marketing that will never go away and it will only get stronger, is word of mouth from your clients. So every single time I teach a lesson, I truly, like in that moment, like I am believing this. This is the only student I have. I don't have another student after them. This one lesson is the last lesson I will ever teach. I want to teach this lesson so well where this student, they have to tell somebody how good this lesson was after the lesson is over. They have to do that. And I honestly, with as great as the social media following is with getting me students, I get so many students on a weekly basis from word of mouth. Oh, I just, this person said they had a great lesson with you. I get probably a text like that once every week or so. It's phenomenal.
Nice. So when you say word of mouth, are these local people? Or are these from online?
Well, word of mouth, they're online everywhere. So yeah. So when I say, I'm old school, when I say word of mouth, either like they text somebody or they share something on social media, like, hey, I had a great guitar lesson with Caitlin today. But my students, I actually have very few in Orlando right now. It went from 100% of my students being in Orlando pre-COVID to now very small percentage. I'm teaching all over. I have students in Australia. I have one in France, a few in the UK. I had one in Kazakhstan, a lot of West Coast people. It's amazing. I never thought I'd be able to reach so many people. And I love inspiring people on the stage. I love performing. Absolutely. That was everything, when that was 100%, when I was giving so much of my time to that. But it's one thing to inspire people on a stage, but to show somebody how to do it, that's amazing to me. And especially, it's so cool to me. My, like the demographic right now with like male and female, it's like 50-50. Like I'm getting just as many female students as male students, which is so cool to me because when I was, starting to learn guitar, girls weren't really playing guitar back then. That has exploded exponentially over the past, decade or so. So it's so cool to me that I can inspire young women, I can inspire young girls to pick up the guitar and just start shredding. Like that's so cool that we're having more female shredders in the world now.
Yeah, social media has really created a really great avenue for everyone to be included and see people like themselves doing something that they want to do and going, oh, I can do it then too.
Yeah.
You said 200 students. So are those certain people like doing like one a month or like one here or there?
I have probably about, last year, 2022, I was teaching about 60 hours a week, one-on-one lessons and all through Zoom. It was a lot. The first day off I took in 2022 was the day after Christmas. That was like because I played a church service on Christmas Day. Like that was the first day off I took the entire calendar year. So I knew I couldn't, and I'm single and I'm ready to like, I have other parts of my life that are fulfilled. And I'm like, I need a little bit more, balance in my life. So I've now narrowed it down to, I have 30 hours of slots open.
There you go.
Whatever students grab them, they grab them, and that's it. And I wasn't teaching 60 hours a week because I needed to teach 60 hours a week. It was because I truly love what I do. And it is so dangerous to love what you do because sometimes you don't know how to tap on the brakes. And I needed to pivot. I needed to scale some stuff. So out of the 200, I would say I see probably, and usually the 30 hours get filled up, and most of them are half hours. So I would say anywhere from like 45 to 50 students, one-on-one lessons I'm doing a week. I have maybe 20 that do once every week. And most of those are like middle and high school students that are wanting like kind of like an extracurricular. A lot of adults are doing every other week, which I think is a really good balance. Then I have some that just want to hit up a lesson once a month. So probably the once a month lessons are probably the biggest distance lesson to lesson, but you usually don't go further than that. Yeah. So, but it's cool too. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. How do you keep people on board in the ones that decide to come in and out? Are you going, hey, haven't seen you in a while type thing?
Yeah, that's great.
Yep.
So I always make sure, and I get asked this a lot, like, I'm a teacher where I truly want my students to understand, because this is true about me. I am 100% invested with them. I start all my lessons by saying, I'm on this journey with you. I am in the fire with you. I'm not going to, be up here and you have to reach me to my level. I'm coming down to you to pull you out of this pit, and we can move forward together. And I want all my students to know that I care about them. And I don't know if I have like a photographic memory or what, but I remember like every student, every detail, every little page of every book everybody left off on. It is so weird. I don't write any of it down. So that is just a gift from God, I think, because that's something that I don't know how I do it. But when I have a student, like let's say somebody's coming in once a month, I usually will send them an email maybe a day or so before and say, hey, just want to see what you've been working on. Kind of what are the goals that you want to hit this month, and let's hit them together. And then I'll kind of add, okay, let's add this part in. Like I had a student that's really working on singer-songwriter stuff and wanting to start like playing in coffee shops and taking lessons just about once a month. And I said, okay, what's your goal for the month of August? Because I saw him just last week. What's your goal for the month of August? I want to start learning how to arrange cover songs in a way where they're a little more stripped down, like take like emo rock and I want to strip it down to like an acoustic. I was like, okay, let's work on that. So I always make sure to check in with them before the lesson, because especially when it's a 30-minute lesson, I mean, you don't got a ton of time. No. You really, time is of the essence with that. So I always make sure to prep with my students before, which has a little more time on my part, but I would rather the student get a full 30 minutes of learning rather than let's chat for 10 minutes, 12 minutes on what you want to accomplish this month. It's not worth it.
Especially on the ones that are far, like once a month. Yeah. Just suppose on the weekly ones, you just saw them, so you know exactly where they left off. Yeah. That's always the challenge, I think, with teaching is the tracking of their progress. So I do a similar thing with a lot of my newer students. I've been doing more of like a outline of their exact goals and everything. So we have it on paper and we always reference back to it. That can be a lot, because I used to do more of that, and I've slowly started to pivot to like really just trying to get the monthly. Not the monthly, like where it's every once a month, like where it's like every week, just the people who are invested that way. But the 60 hours a week. I used to, when I was in my 20s, I taught every single day.
I'm doing more group classes now through Till, and that's, I do want to get into doing more of that. But the one-on-ones, people love it because it's designed for them. But the working with Till has been great. I do that free cage class every Wednesday night. It's so fun. I usually get anywhere from like 15 to 30 people in the room, but it's on the phone, so they don't stay in the whole time. But then I do that secret weapons course on Thursday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, and that's great. Got a lot of people in that room. So the group courses are awesome for me because I get to reach more people in just like 1 hour time. But the one-on-ones, it's so cool where it's tailored just to them.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of people that and it's interesting, I think, with the lessons, the variation between, or the differences between all my students. Like, there are certain guys, I don't know if you have this, certain people where I know I have certain people who are really almost just there. They really just want the guitar hang.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, I got some. Yep.
Yeah. Who are like,
yep.
you're like, you know, I kind of let them just go and like, I've been working on this. And I'm like, hey, oh yeah, why don't you think about doing this? Like, oh yeah, cool. And like, oh yeah, and then there's this riff like from this thing, and they just want to be there for the guitar hang.
Yeah.
And like, I'm trying to sneak in nuggets while they're talking about all the different things they're working on, because maybe they've been playing for a really long time. Maybe they're like I have one guy, for instance, who's probably in his 50s, and he's really just stoked on talking about guitar every time I'm with him. Yeah. So a lot of times I'll like try to sneak stuff in, like, oh, why don't you try to look at it this way and work on that placement. Yeah. And where there are other students who are really like, guide me, show me what I should be working on. Yeah. And it's that part. I don't know how you approach that part, because that part for me is the tricky part, because it's to have my brain go back and forth between the two aspects. It's like, because I with the person who's really there for the hang, I don't want to be like, hey, we need to hone this in, because if that's the way they learn and the way they interact and really what they're looking for in general by paying me, then I'm like, that's great. Like, but let's try to figure some, and as opposed to the opposite, where there are people who are like, guide me, show me. Yeah. And take them by the hand. Yeah. How do you go back and forth between those two mindsets? Because for me, it's always like, I have to like, it's like a complete shift if they're back to back too. Yeah.
That's a really good question. And I have plenty of both. I really do. For me, just as a teacher, you see so much stuff. And I'm now at the point in my life where whenever there is some sort of difficulty or some sort of little frustrating aspect like that, like I've got this student and this student, total opposite teaching methods. What do I do with that? I always try to approach something with a heart of gratitude. Honestly, I know that sounds like cheesy, but for me, I'm thinking, well, how cool is it? How grateful I am that I have two completely different students here. I've got like, I can totally invest in this one student, taking them by the hand and show them. And I love doing that. I love being like a guitar mom or like a mentor, like taking them through and like spoon feeding them through every step of the process. And then how cool is it that I get to sit back and chat with people about their new Jackson guitars that they bought? Like, like the shredders, you know, I love being able to do that. So I first approach it with gratitude, like how cool that not every lesson is the same. That I think is so important with everything that I do. Always approaching it with a heart of gratitude. But when I'm approaching both of those situations, I really just think, how am I going to make this a really efficient lesson, an effective lesson, while still allowing them to enjoy this completely through like their guitar love language? Does that make sense? So if I have the guy that just wants to chat up guitars or chat up gear, and I've got a ton of those, I will already, like the first or second lesson with them, I will be paying attention to just the style that they're talking about, the songs or the bands that they're kind of throwing out, peppering here or there in the conversation. I will make a note of that. And then I will have a song or a riff or like a technique used in that, in those styles or those bands or those songs. And when I see an opening, I'm going to say, hey, that's like just like what, like if he's talking about some Ozzy song, that's just what he did here. Like, that's just what Randy Rhoads did here. Like, let's talk about this. And then it'll kind of, so I try to get into some angle where they're going to want to talk about it, but it's going to be more guitar playing related. Does that make sense?
That's so funny. That's exactly what I do.
Yeah.
It's the exact same thing.
The digging.
And don't get me wrong. There's nothing, this is, if anyone's listening about like who does this, like that's great. Be yourself, do your thing. Like
I love it.
It doesn't bother me at all. It's more of like, it's just noticing like, oh, there's like a shift in my brain that happens when I go between student and neither student I don't think is wrong. Cause I want the student to have the best time possible during lessons. For sure. And I want them to learn in the best way that works for them. So that's exactly what I do too, where we'll be talking like, that's like, did you know that that's actually, we talked about mixed Lydian last week. That's mixed Lydian right there.
Yeah,
like that's
exactly.
what that flat 7 chord,
exactly.
all of a sudden they're introducing, like all of a sudden it's like kind of hinting at that. It's like, oh, really? That's cool. And, or like, that's this or whatever. And there's like, a handful of students who are both for me, where it's like some guys are really there and they want to talk and that's great. I mean, I think there's just as much value as talking things out, as there is of like, what do I need to do? Show me what I need to do. And then just kind of, but then you have to be like, all right, work on this. And I think it's a different approach, but that's so fun. That's exactly what I do. You're just waiting.
Yeah.
For me,
you're just waiting. Yeah.
It's for me, it's a sad, I guess the best thing to say, self-conscious probably isn't the best thing to do, but I'm always like, how can I be the best teacher right now? Yeah. And if I feel like I'm like, okay, I need to give this person something tangible. We can't just talk about stuff all day, but I don't want to also like, so I have to still be teacher in that moment. And when I say we can't just talk about stuff all day, they can really, because it's like but like, as I can't just do that. I have to still be teacher. So I'm like, oh, this is this. And just like you're talking about. I
do have the occasional student where they will actually preface the lesson by saying, I'm a talker. I just want to talk. So like, if we have a lesson where it's all to me talking, like I'm totally fine with it. And I was like, okay, that's great. Yeah. Like I've had some where they actually preface it and that's actually better. So I know what I'm getting into.
I love it. I love when a student prefaces those things, because otherwise I will feel this pull to be like, I am a teacher in this moment and I have to give them something tangible. Because I've had students be like, do you mind if we just talk about like tone all day? And I'm like, like where do you want to go with it? Like, you want to talk about like live amps? You want to talk about building tones and like, you're like, oh I use an Axe Effects, or I use this. Can we talk about that? I'm like, sweet, screen share, Axe Effects.
Love
like,
that's it. That's
and
it.
Just like, this is what I do. Yep. And it's like, great. Yeah, if that's what you're cool with, let's go for it. Yeah. I think that's really great. So you're doing all those lessons and then lots of gigging, but I saw lots of like you said, like the super churches, the bigger churches as well.
Yeah. I do usually on Sundays. I do that. And I usually get paid for. Was getting paid like great money. Just up till this past year, playing at churches on Sundays, and I'm trying to move into more of where when I am like, I truly want to serve the church. And so when I'm doing stuff like that, I try to do more volunteer stuff when I can, but my Sundays are usually taken up with that. For gigs right now, I can't believe I'm at this point, and I would never have thought I would get here, but like the gigs that I'm taking are the gigs that I want to take, not because I need to put food on my table. Do you know what I mean? Like it's really a nice place to be. And again, I can't believe I'm here as a musician.
Feels like a bonus,
dude. When I'm able, like the gigs I have the rest of the month, they're like corporate gigs, big conventions. It's awesome. It's a lot of stuff for Disney, out at Disney, like touristy stuff in Orlando. Like that's awesome for me. A lot of classical guitar, like playing for banquets and stuff. A lot of wedding gigs and things like that. Absolutely love it. But it's nice to be able to have some higher end gigs and not just the sweaty clubs and the sweaty outdoor stuff, which paying the dues with that is a wonderful thing. It's a great experience. I'm so glad I've had a past of that, but it's nice to be able to, I do probably a few gigs every month now. Probably ramping that up a little bit more. I got some projects that I'm working on. Should be cool. But yeah, it's a weird place to be in, like post-COVID, like picking the gigs that I want to take rather than anything that comes my way. I have to say yes to it because I need to, pay my bills, but it's a cool place to be right now.
Yeah. And I think for people listening too, I'm sure there was some front end work on making those connections and
definitely
getting people involved that way, because that was always a thing when I was teaching at the college of like, how do I get gigs? And I remember one student specifically saying during like a huge, like not, what's the word I'm looking for? Not meeting, but it was like an all school, like all student, all teacher, I don't know what to call it, meeting, I guess, but it wasn't a meeting. It was like something
like a connecting thing.
Yeah. And I remember they opened it up to student comments. And one of the students was like, I think the school should work harder to find us gigs. And I was a student at the time, and I was like, I don't think that's how that works. I was like,
yeah, I missed that class.
I was like, yeah. So that's, I think, a misconception of like being able to sit back and wait. You have to kind of be, you have to be just as productive in finding gigs as you are.
Nobody owes you a gig. You have to go out, and we live in a world now where everything is so spoon fed. Like even when people want to learn guitar parts, they hop on YouTube, the tutorials up there. Like we need to get back to the hunt of things. Like you have to learn how to hunt for gigs. And it's so important too, to realize your social media platform, that's basically a portfolio, an online portfolio of all of your work, and start putting stuff up there. So people like, as soon as somebody gets my contact info or sees my name, like she's going to be on this gig, or I'm looking for a guitar player, hey, check out Caitlin. They immediately, they go to your Instagram, they go to your YouTube, they see what you can do. So just make sure you're putting yourself out there with that. But relationships are everything. Relationships are going to help open the doors. And yeah, I think it's if you have the mindset where nobody owes me anything, I have to get it myself, you're going to figure out a way to do that. Kind of a no options mentality. Like you got to make it happen. Yeah. I wish I had a class where they just got gigs for me. That would have been awesome.
Yeah, I know.
They're not necessarily gigs, but the only help I had from my university was my professor was very instrumental in putting me into competitions and also allowing me to take some performances. Like there was a performance in Tampa where I opened up for Pepe Romero, great classical guitarist, that was like nerve wracking, like you wouldn't believe to be a college kid. Pepe Romero, that was insane. But yeah, so I've been able to do some like more classical guitar performances like that, but those aren't like the everyday gigs that are going to, pave your way in the industry. So you have to learn how to do it on your own. You have to start connecting. There's so many resources online. There's so many, like in Orlando, we've got that like Gigs for Grabs Orlando, the Gigs for Grab pages on Facebook, all that gig salad stuff. You can, if you're going to do weddings, you've got all those websites that have the online portfolio and profile of different, musicians. You can put your stuff out there. There's there's no excuse not to be out of gigs. Yeah, and wherever you are, you can always hunt for them. You really can.
Yeah, and you speak of weddings too. These days there are so many just like wedding bands that have a large roster of people. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you can just hit them up and be like, "Hey, are you looking for more people?" And if they say no, it's like whatever, go on to the next.
And I give so many gigs like that away. I have so many bands here in Orlando. Hey, can you? We need a sub for this. No, I can't do it, but I'll get you another sub. Exactly. Honestly, I think I'm at a point in my life right now where I'm giving away so many gigs rather than taking them, just because I've got too much going on.
I feel you. Yeah, I was there. It's such a counterintuitive thing too, because like as they come in, I get like requests. Mm-hmm. And my initial reaction is like, accept. And then I'm like, wait, you told yourself you're going to take more gigs this summer. You're booked out solid. You might have that Saturday free, but you have no other Saturdays free around that. Yeah. So I'm like, decline. And it's like, just because I want to take them. And then I don't know if you do this too. There's some times where I'm like, where I've like recently I was like, I'll totally drive 2 hours, do an afternoon gig, come back, do a wedding, wake up, play church. And then when it happens, you're like, oh, I didn't realize this. And it's not even about,
I did that this past weekend. Yeah.
That's what I did. That's exactly what I did.
Weekend. Yeah.
And Sunday I was just like exhausted. And then I scheduled a master class on Sunday after church.
Of course. Yeah.
So like right after that master, I like laid down and fell asleep. Mm-hmm. But it was still fun. Like it was really great. It's not even about for that stuff. Like someone listening might think it's like, oh, that's a lot to prep for. That's actually not the hard part. Mm-hmm. The hard part is just it's a lot on your body. I feel like
that's it. Yeah. Once you pass like 25, it's like I feel like as a musician, you're like already 50. Like that's what my body is telling me. Yeah.
Yeah. I had to like one of the gigs was down a hill on a dock playing to a bunch of boats on a lake, and lugging stuff down the hill, not so hard. Mm-hmm. Lugging stuff up the hill. Yeah. I was like, whoa, I got my workout for the day. And then I had to put on a suit and drive to a wedding and then lug all my stuff into the wedding and out. And by the time you get home, it's 1 p.m.
See, that's the hard part.
Yeah.
But thank God that's the hard part. Like this past weekend I was playing a Latin gig, a big Latin like night of worship. It was all Latin music, and it was so much. Of course, I've had so much stuff to be doing. I've had the music for like 3 weeks, and I look at it the night before, obviously, because I have other things that I have to get done. So I just listen to everything and kind of look through the charts. I honestly don't really play a lick of it until I get there in the rehearsal. But honestly, I tell my students this, if you can look at a rhythm chart or look at a lead sheet and listen to it and be able to visualize where it is on the guitar, do that before you pick up the guitar. It's going to save you so much time. So that's how I practice stuff. And I do a lot of practicing in the car, listening to it. But I had that
Sunday morning.
Yeah. I had that on a Saturday night. Then I had playing for a church service that was like an hour and a half away, come back, did some like nightly masterclass thing. And then, but honestly, the hard part is not the preparation. Like if you know what you're doing, like I've spent my entire life prepping for that gig. You know what I mean? The hard part is, having 3 hours of sleep, 4 hours of sleep, lugging gear in. Thank God I don't have to lug amps around anymore. It's all on the board. But that's the hardest part of it. It's the toll that it takes on the body. I don't know if you get like this, but usually like every month I will look at the holes in my schedule and think, when is a day where I can sleep in past like 7 a.m. or where's a night that I know I'm going to be able to get more than like 4 hours of sleep? I honestly look at my calendar and I'm like, yes, okay. So September 2nd, that's the day. That's the day I can sleep in. It's like I get like that, and sometimes it's like
once you get into your like late 30s, because I think you're a bit younger than me. Once you get into your late 30s, you build that in. Like
you
like
have
it
to.
is it is built in. Like I my phone literally has a 10:45 bedtime and a 7 a.m. wake time on my phone.
Yeah.
And I'm usually like stick into that. Unless it's a weekend. Actually, what's funny, when I was younger, it was I didn't play much church gigs, so I always slept in on the weekends.
Yeah.
Now, and I didn't get enough sleep during the week. Now it's the opposite. Yeah. I get my 8 hours, but on the weekends I don't get much sleep because it's like I'll always double book myself, where it's like wedding and then church, and then Sunday's just like shot, just like tired on Sunday. Yeah. But I did that for a long time. I used to do online lessons, like pre-recorded, kind of back in the, like, you remember, like, they're still around, but you know, like True Fire.
Yeah.
So there was one called Infinite Guitar, and like 10, 12 years ago when I first started, longer than that, 12 years ago, I would stay up late all the time working on stuff. And now it's like, I mean, once 8:30 passes, I'm just like my mental state is just like gone. Whereas I think in my 20s, I would often like get this real big boost at about 9 p.m. and then work till like 12 or 1 or 2. And now I just don't have it. I just don't have it as much anymore. I'm just like old man getting
I'm moving in that direction now. I think I cap my lessons at like 8 p.m. now. I have master classes now in the evenings later. But what I really don't like about myself is my creativity starts just going crazy like around midnight. Like that's when I get all the creative stuff, and I'm like, I really should just record this right now. I should record this. Get the guitar. No, Caitlin, go to bed. Oh my gosh. Like even Sunday night, I was able to, it was like 10:30 or 11. I was like, I can go to bed early. This is not like 1 o'clock in the morning. I can go to bed early. And of course I'm like, oh man, I have this idea that I want to teach on this, like,
well, especially if you're single too, like there's just no one.
And I'm very single right now. The only other person in my house is my dog. So it's like, I have nobody I'm going to bother. I've got an office. She's always up and running around. So
so you're exactly, there's no one to bother. So like, so that's part of it when you're, living with someone or in a relationship or married, is like, you're not going to do much past the time that person goes to sleep, because you're like, well, I can only do so much. Like I basically the most I'll do is like sit in bed and like write out stuff I'm working on and just try to like tap as quiet as I can. And that's about as much as I get. Like the idea of like recording a lesson at night is just forever gone. I used to do that. I used to like stay up when I lived by myself and be like, I'll record it, and it'd be silent recording. Obviously there's people in the apartment building or whatever I was living in. But I would say, oh gosh, while you have it,
because now I'm thinking, well, I need to take this opportunity because what if a year from now that's not the case,
Yeah, I mean, because that's probably I blame my age for it, and it's like, wait, I think that's probably part of it, but the other part is just being conscientious of the other person living in the house and going, I can't really doing stuff past 10, because it'd be noisy, but. Anyway, now into life stuff.
Yeah,
but anyway,
I love it.
Appreciate you being on. This was great.
I appreciate you for having me. This is great. Yeah, I respect you so much as a teacher, an educator, and a musician. You're so tasteful with everything you do. The way that you speak the language of music beautifully. The way that you communicate that to students is just brilliant. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you saying that. Likewise. Yeah. We'll have to do it again sometime. This will be the second season of the podcast.
Cool.
So it'll be a few weeks, maybe a month. It just kind of depends on the flow. I'm just about to start posting for second season, which I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to do the seasons. I might just have to continually post going in the future. We'll see. But still, this is So you'll see this. I'll let you know when I post it. And
cool.
But appreciate you being on.
Oh man, this is awesome. Yeah. Well, then hopefully by the end of the day, I'll be an aunt. I haven't heard anything. I just got a text saying she's 6 centimeters dilated, so she's almost. Oh my gosh, almost ready. So crazy.
Well, congratulations.
Day, yeah. Well, thank you truly for everything, and Godspeed with everything. Best of luck with everything you're doing. You will be successful with everything you do. Yeah.
Thank you. You as
awesome,
well.
Man. I'll see you later. Bye.
Bye.
If you'd like to join my Patreon to get your questions answered by the guests, then you can go to patreon.com/Mike Salo. There are several tiers there that you can take part in, and lots of different perks like pre-recorded guitar lessons or even one-on-one guitar lessons with me. There are live masterclasses every week for certain tiers. And again, you can go to patreon.com/Mike Salo to check that out.